Superman versus the Hulk. You know, it's hard to think of a much more difficult subject to discuss, because both of these characters, as time's gone on, they've been around for so long, so many different writers have worked on them, and each time a new writer has come on, they've redefined the parameters of what are their abilities, what are their powers. Some abilities are added in, others are taken out, some powers and strengths are increased in one area and decreased in another. So there's so many different incarnations of both Superman and the Hulk that when we're talking about the two of them going head to head, which versions are we talking about would fight each other? And depending on whether you're a Marvel fan or whether you're a DC fan, it can be tempting to take the weakest incantation of one of the characters and put him up against the strongest incantation of the other one. We're going to look for the balance between the two extremes of the characters, and we're going to compare those. Also, another guideline that we're going to need is we're going to have to assume that this is a fair fight between Superman and the Hulk. Because it's tempting to just say, well, you know, if somebody handed the Hulk kryptonite brass knuckles, he could just stove Superman's head in, and Superman, he could just hide behind a tree and just wait until the Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner and then jump out and sucker punch him in the brain. But that'd be a pretty boring flame war, it'd be very short. So we need to assume that it's a fair fight and that Hulk can't use kryptonite, Superman can't attack Bruce Banner. Everybody knows Superman's weakness is kryptonite, okay? Let's not even bother describing that because we already know it. But what a lot of people don't know is Superman is also vulnerable to red solar energy. And what this is because Superman's Kryptonian DNA, his makeup, means that his cells are living solar batteries. And when those solar batteries absorb the yellow light from our sun as opposed to the red light from his homeworld of Krypton, that's the source of all of his superpowers. So his superpowers come from this winning combination between his unique Kryptonian cells in his body and the unique yellow solar energy from our sun. But the thing with this though is that if he is then exposed to red solar energy, the result is he basically turns into a regular guy. So he's vulnerable also to red solar energy. A lot of people don't know Superman is also vulnerable to magic. Now this is not so much a weakness as it is that his Kryptonian constitution doesn't allow extra protection against magic. Reason being because the source of his superpowers are natural phenomenon, while magic is a supernatural phenomenon. So he would be as vulnerable to magic as anyone else would. Superman can also be damaged by extreme physical force. Yes, it's true that he's invulnerable, but his invulnerability, we'll discuss that a little bit more in detail later, but his invulnerability, part of it comes from his ability of his cells to regenerate themselves and repair themselves, which is again directly related to the yellow solar energy from our sun. But if he's copping some serious beatings, and he's copping it so fast that his cells can't repair themselves in time, eventually he will actually just keel over and die. This is exactly what happened in the Superman 75 issue released in 1992, where Superman actually died. So we can see that Superman's powers and strength is not limitless. Hulk, on the other hand, he to this day has no measurable limit on how strong he can be or the capacity for him to recuperate from an injury. So apparently, Hulk has no weaknesses at all. And this is not just because of his regenerative qualities, but if he gets cut, he heals right up. It's also because those regenerative qualities are also adaptive, which means that he can generate tissue over or inside his body that can allow him to breathe underwater if he's underwater, that can allow him to survive out in the vacuum of space for an extended period of time, in a similar way to how Superman himself can withstand these extremes. In fact, the only weakness that the Hulk might have is his dual personality, this constant pushing and conflict between Bruce Banner and the Hulk. But ironically, this can also be a strength of his as well, because this duality means it's much more difficult for anyone to take control of him and take control of his mind. Psychics have tried to control him, Magicians have tried to put spells on him to get him to be their drone and do what they want him to do. And it's never really worked out well for them. While Superman, on the other hand, he has actually had people take control of his mind on several occasions. Poison Ivy managed to do it, even to the point where Superman actually gave a kryptonite ring to Batman and said to him, if ever someone takes control of me, use this and bring me down, because I know you'll do it. Obviously, Superman has a much wider range of abilities than the Hulk does. Most notably is his super speed and his flight. Now, you might think this comes from his strength, but actually it doesn't, because basically he's got this skin-tight aura around him that anything within that aura he can control and lift off the ground. This aura also is part of what protects him from getting injured, which is the reason why his suit, which is also skin-tight, never gets ripped or burnt or anything, because it's protected by this aura as well. It also means that anyone who he touches, makes physical contact with, he can engulf them with this aura and they can fly. You see him and Lois Lane flying and they're just touching fingertips basically. The Hulk is said to be as fast as Thor is. However, I'm skeptical about that because Hulk's speed comes from the enormous strength in his legs. And the official line on this is, the Hulk can run at super speeds by using his super strong legs. But when he reaches a certain speed, his feet are pushing down with such force that it starts to smash up the ground underneath him that he's walking on. So he loses traction and this slows him down. This is the reason why the Hulk jumps around a lot of the time, because it's a lot faster than him trying to run along the surface. And he can jump high, he can jump up into Earth's low orbit and right across country. But you've got to ask, how fast can someone really travel if they're jumping? There's got to be a limit on that. So Superman would definitely be faster than the Hulk. So I would say if they were in a fight, it would be pretty difficult for Hulk to grab a hold of Superman, because Superman's speed is not reliant on any contact with the ground or any other physical objects, unlike the Hulk's. So he could move a lot faster than the Hulk. But what the Hulk lacks in speed, he more than makes up for in strength. The Hulk's powers are classified at world breaker levels. Now, in case you may be thinking that this is a violation of the guidelines that we set out earlier on in this video, of not being able to use an example of a character's powers when they're at their furthest extreme, I don't believe this is breaking this rule, because the Hulk, right from day one, has always been written as a rage-fueled monster whose strength is only limited by the extent of his rage. And you can't put a limit on rage. We also got to take into account the fighting skills of each of these. Now, we all know how Hulk fights. He smashes. That's what he does. That's all he needs to do. He's so strong. But Superman has actually been trained by many different people in fighting skills. He's been trained by Mogul, by Wildcat, by Wonder Woman, even by Batman. So in terms of technical combat, Superman would have a slight upper hand in style, so the Hulk would definitely have a strength advantage, but Superman would have more of a speed and style advantage. Yes, if you didn't know, they did actually genuinely kill off Superman back in the 90s. He was killed. They ceased publication of the comic for about 3 months. They had a memorial issue. He was absolutely dead. Eventually they did resurrect him. But what's interesting about his death was the villain that they chose to kill him was not Lex Luthor, was not Brainiac, was not any of these other mad scientist types that you might have thought. Instead, they created a whole new villain called Doomsday, and he was a great big Hulk-like bad guy. He was basically the DC World's version of the Incredible Hulk, and he just pounded on Superman, pounded on him until he couldn't take it anymore, and he eventually died. Now, it's easy to look at that and say, well, simple, that basically means the Hulk will beat Superman, but that's not exactly the case, because when they were fighting each other, it wasn't so much that Superman was defeated by Doomsday, it was more so that Superman fought him to an extent where he was willing to give his last ounce of energy to defeat him. So Superman really defeated him by sacrificing himself. So you can't really say that he lost. But it turns out that it's not only Superman who has been killed once before. In fact, I did a bit of research and Hulk has been killed not once, but twice by the same guy. He was killed by Red Hulk because he drained all the gamma radiation out of his body, thus leaving only Bruce Banner. And for a long time, Bruce Banner could not transform into the Hulk because all the radiation was gone. Another time he fought Red Hulk, it was just a straight up fist fight and he was killed. He was impaled on a trident and that was it. It was all over. Now I should probably confess at this point, I'm actually a DC fan. I am not a Marvel fan. So I knew a lot of Superman stuff right off the top of my head. I had to do a lot of research on the Hulk. And one of the things I found when I did my research on Hulk was really eye-opening for me. There was an occasion where there was a doomsday type satellite orbiting the Earth that was called God's Eye. And they sent Hulk up into space to destroy this satellite, which he did. But then the bad guys realized, hang on, we've got Hulk floating out in space waiting for a lift back to Earth. We got a chance to be rid of him forever here. Let's just hurl him off into space and land him on some uninhabited planet and he'll never make it back. This then brought in the Planet Hulk storyline. But the bad guys stuffed up and they accidentally sent him to a planet that did have life on it, so he was able to use their technology to eventually return back to Earth. And this then started the World War Hulk storyline. I think this is the proverbial thorn in Hulk's paw here. If he's going to fight Superman, this is going to be a problem. We know that Hulk, because of his adaptive abilities, is able to survive in the void of space, but he evidently is incapable of controlling his trajectory if he is traveling through space. Superman is able to fly and direct and control where he goes out in space. So I've reached a verdict and I'm almost afraid to say it, because I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but the winner of the Superman vs. Hulk fight is Superman. Now before all the Marvel fans start filling up the comments page with obscenities, let me just explain why I think this. Because it's not just me being biased because I'm a DC boy. It's basically two main reasons. The first reason is, after all the research I've done, this is how I would envision the encounter between the two of them going down. When the Hulk and Superman start to fight, Hulk's going to start laying into Superman like nobody's business. And at first, Superman's going to be able to take it all pretty fine. But the longer the fight goes, the more angry Hulk gets. So his anger and his power levels continue to rise and rise and rise to lethal levels. At this point, Superman is stuffed. But that means that Superman's going to have a window period, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes when the fight starts, where he can withstand Hulk's attack and can plan out something to do. I think during this time is when Superman would grab him, lift him up into space, throw him onto the other side of the universe or something like that. Because once Hulk is out in the void of space, he can't control where he goes. Then Superman can just take his time, dump him on some lifeless, uninhabited planet. Once Hulk is there, he'll be able to survive on that planet, but he is never coming back. Even if by some miracle he does make it back, it's going to be a couple of million years before you see him again. So I believe Superman would use that brief window period to take advantage of this ability that he has but the Hulk doesn't. The second reason I think that Superman would win is because even though there are a lot of different ways that you could beat Superman or even kill Superman, the Hulk, once he's in that Hulk state, he's not going to have the clarity of mind to think, I'm going to go set up some red solar lamps, or I'm going to make sure he can't lift me up in the air, or I'm going to go get an enchanted magical weapon to beat him with. It's the classic case of brain over brawn. And I am aware that the Hulk did go through a period where he could still be smart while he was in the Hulk form, when he took on the Professor persona, but that's the exception rather than the rule. You can put that down more so to the writers needing to experiment with different things with the character to keep it fresh. But they always come back to the Hulk being, as the name would suggest, just a mindless Hulk. Now I gotta say, because of the Hulk's vulnerability out in space, this is the only reason that I'm awarding a victory to Superman. Because Hulk is definitely stronger. No doubt about that. It's gotta suck though. If it wasn't for this one ability that Superman has to fly in space and Hulk doesn't, Superman would be dead as a doornail. It's a little bit like how Thor would be able to beat Superman, not because Thor's stronger than Superman, but because Thor's powers are based on magic, and Superman is vulnerable to magic. If it wasn't for that one thing, Thor would never beat Superman. It's a similar situation here. Hulk is much stronger, much more powerful than Superman is, but he can't fly in space. So I think Superman would exploit that and would win.